Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm joined once again. He is back, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how are you doing?
All right. Still feeling a little bit of that East Coast time zone, especially after having, a 20-hour travel day right after 4 hours of sleep.
Oh, that just sounds like a great time to me. I thought my travel schedule was bad doing the flight and then the drive back-to-back days, but I think I'd rather do that than, all at once, so to speak.
That's what happens when you go to the airport 6 hours earlier, hoping to get an earlier flight, and it doesn't happen.
Nope. Yep. And you're just left sitting there killing time. I feel that I was 6 hours in Nashville on a layover this trip, but anyway, we are here today, a little bit tired, but none the worse for wear, to break down Week 18, last week of the regular season, Packers-Bears in Lambeau, playoff spot on the line, Bears trying to play spoiler, in Lambeau, in January, in the winter. I mean, as a famous Packers quarterback once said, how can you not be romantic about football? I mean, if you were thinking
and
about...
those are the only quotes from him we need to talk about this week.
Exactly. But that's the thing is, I feel like this is just is there anything more football iconic than Packers-Bears Week 18, game on the line, winter Lambeau game? I mean, come on. This is going to be...
It would be nice to get a snow globe game. I don't think we're going to get it. It's going to snow the day before, so I don't think we're going to get a snow globe game, but that would be pretty cool.
Hey, we can always hope. But anyway, we are here to break down this game, talk to you a little bit about what we're seeing in the numbers, what we're seeing when we're looking at both these teams, the trajectory of both these teams. Bears have been really hot. Packers have been sometimes hot, sometimes not. But we're going to be talking all about that. Before we do, though, just wanted to pitch a couple of things. If you like what you hear today, come give us a follow on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out when we have new articles out. When we have new episodes out, we tweet out articles that we find interesting, pieces of stats that we find when researching for these episodes, videos that we find interesting, pieces of Packers news, etc., and then come subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We even put all our episodes out on YouTube as well if you want to check that out there. So come check us out wherever if you like what you hear. And then also, I just wanted to shout out. I was recently a guest on Hey, We Like Your Pod with Matt and Dawn, and we had a great time talking about, Packers fandom and about this upcoming game. So go check them out as well. They are awesome. They are always doing a great job of putting a spotlight on different Packers content creators. And, if you don't love listening to us, you can definitely find another great Packers content creator through them. And they are also great content creators in and of themselves. But yeah, so go check out that episode. Go check out their podcast. They are great. But Dad, should we get talking about this game, or is there anything else you wanted to say?
Oh, I just want to say, if you like what you're hearing tonight, thank Tommy for getting me a new mic stand so that for Christmas, he got tired of me knocking it over in the middle of the episodes.
There would definitely probably be about a cut every single episode where you had...
it wasn't quite that much, because sometimes I caught it without it making noise.
You say that, but I think our listeners might say differently.
You think our listeners know better?
But anyway, let's start breaking down this game, Dad, and start, as we always do, with the injury report. It is a bit of a full one for the Packers and for the Bears as well, honestly. But let's start with the players who are not going to be playing this weekend. For the Packers, that is A.J. Dillon. It is actually for a stinger that he sustained last week against the Vikings. It is not for that broken thumb, according to Matt LaFleur. And then Rudy Ford will be out in this game as well. He's missed a few in a row now, so sucks for that he's going to not be able to close out the regular season. And then on the Bears side, Darnell Mooney, their second receiver, who has the third most receiving yards on the year for the Bears per Pro Football Reference, is also going to be out in this game. So definitely some key losses from both sides, whether that's, A.J. Dillon, who oftentimes handles up to about half the carries for the Packers, and then Darnell Mooney, one of their leading receivers on that team. Moving on to doubtful, though, where I think we have some more interesting things. For the Packers, Isaiah McDuffie, linebacker, is doubtful in this one. Kind of expected, given the fact that, that injury on Sunday against the Vikings when he got kind of slammed between a few people did not look great, but he is doubtful in this one. But for the Bears, this is a bit interesting. Jalen Johnson, their Pro Bowl corner, keep an eye on his availability. He is doubtful in this game with a shoulder injury, and he hasn't practiced this week. So that is definitely something to keep an eye on there. He would be a huge loss for them. I believe PFF has him as either a top 3 corner, I believe, in coverage this year.
Number one in coverage grade.
Goodness. No, yeah, he's had a great year. Not having him this game could be a huge loss for the Bears. Moving down to questionable, we got a few more names for each team. For the Packers, Elton Jenkins is questionable. He did say he was feeling pretty good yesterday when they talked to him in the locker room. Logged a limited practice on Friday. We hope we see him out there. Jaden Reed is questionable, but he did practice at least every single day this week, although he was limited each day this week. Preston Smith didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. He is questionable, but he was limited on Friday, and he's only missed 1 game in his career. So I think he's probably going to try and tough it out. It's with that ankle injury that he sustained against the Vikings. He was able to come back in that game too, so that is at least another good sign. Christian Watson is questionable. He practiced Wednesday and Thursday, but not Friday, although Matt LaFleur said that was kind of the game plan and that they just wanted to give him a day of rest before the game. He said earlier this week, Watson that is, that he expects to play in this game. So, maybe we'll have Watson back, which could be very exciting. Dontavian Wicks, also questionable. He was a full participant both Thursday and Friday, so it's kind of expected that he should play, hopefully, knock on wood. And then there are 3 players who are questionable but have not been activated from IR yet, and those are Luke Musgrave, Luke Tenuta, and Emmanuel Wilson. So they are all listed as questionable. They could be activated. I believe it has to be done by tomorrow. And the Packers are currently at 53 players on their roster, so they would have to cut someone if they wanted to activate any of them off of IR. Dad,
cut or move to IR, I suppose.
Cut or
somebody's
move to
got
IR,
a nagging injury.
Exactly. And then on the Bears side, just to wrap things up, Kyler Gordon, one of their starting corners, was not listed as any injury, but then was limited on Friday. So that is something. He was listed with a calf injury. That is something where they might be out both of their starting corners in this game, which would be a really big blow to a Chicago defense that we're going to talk all about in this episode. And then Khalil Herbert also was not listed Wednesday or Thursday, but then didn't practice Friday. He was listed with a combination of a back injury and then not injury-related personal. So, hopefully everything's going on, off the field okay with him. But they might be without him on this weekend. He is questionable. Cole Kmet, he participated more in each practice each day, but he is questionable. But he was up to a full participant on Friday, so expect him to play. Lucas Patrick, you might remember him, former Packer, was not listed Wednesday or Thursday, but then was limited Friday with a calf injury as well. So that is something to keep an eye on. And then Patrick Scales, their long snapper, was a full participant Friday. He is questionable. They did sign a long snapper to their practice squad, so, just in case I think he was not able to play. But the fact that he was able to participate fully on Friday does seem to be a good stretch. Dad, I know I've been talking for a while. My mouth is feeling dry. I'm going to throw it over to you. Any thoughts on any of these injuries for either team?
Well, I'd say some of the good news for the Packers, again, the right side, is that there's no designations for Campbell or Aaron Jones or Jair or Josh Myers or Quay Walker. So some players who maybe picked up injuries in the last game, like Myers, or missed the last game, like Campbell and Jair, and players who have had a lot of weeks of injuries, like Jones. And I think that's going to be good for having, especially with McDuffie out, to have Campbell and Walker seeming like they're going to be a full go, because we're going to need guys who can go sideline to sideline and try to chase after Fields. And be nice to have Jair, see if he's up to full strength, full speed to go against DJ Moore.
Yeah, we're going to talk all about the threat that DJ Moore poses. Before we get into specifics, though, just a bit of, general information coming up on this game. Some quick facts. The game is in Lambeau, 3:25 Central Time kickoff. It's supposed to be cloudy with a high of 36. Hopefully it doesn't start raining, or it might get really nasty for the fans out there. It's not supposed to, though. Packers are favored by 3 with an over-under of 45 for an implied score of 24-21 Green Bay. Dad, anything about that general stuff, or should we start talking about some of the challenges the Bears present?
Yeah. Essentially, that basically at a neutral field, they're about even.
Yep.
Based on the what the odds makers think.
Yeah, usually around 3 points, worth about home field advantage. That makes sense. I don't know. I guess it kind of
both teams are kind of on a hot streak for different reasons.
Yeah, but we're going to talk all about that. But let's start talking about the Bears, though, Dad. Unless there was anything you wanted to add there.
Nope. I think we'd start talking about the Bears in general, that they've, as we said, they're a bit on a bit of a hot streak too. Most seem to be mostly driven by their defense, but they've won 4 of their last 5 and 5 of 3 since trading for Montez Sweat near the trade deadline, and that's after starting 2-6. So it was a pretty big turnaround.
Yeah, I've been kind of looking at their splits a little bit differently. I've been looking at it, they started 2-7 and are since 5-2. But you can look at it in several ways. That kind of cutoff of when Montez Sweat came there is also, interesting to pull stats from. I've been pulling a lot of mine. They started 2-7. They had one game with Sweat, and then he kind of, locked into his spot on the team. And they've been 5-2, since he had that game of warm up. But yeah, 5-2 in their last 7, 2-7 before that. They are definitely hitting a hot streak. They are 7-9 on the year. Some traditional statistics per FTN Fantasy. They are 13th in points per drive on offense. 13th in points per drive and 22nd in yards per drive on offense. Compare that to Green Bay, 9th and 7th. And then they are 14th in points per drive and 8th in yards per drive allowed on defense. Green Bay is 23rd and 25th. By DVOA, which kind of takes into account, strength of opponent, they are 14th on defense, 17th against the pass, and 4th against the run. And then they are 23rd on offense, 23rd in passing, and 10th in rushing. And then they are 20th in special teams. Green Bay is down at 27th for those of you keeping track at home. Dad, anything stand out to you? Just some of these general markers for the Bears. I think, for me, a lot of the whole season stats don't actually tell the whole story of this Bears team because they're just a completely different team the last 7 weeks to me.
They were so bad in the beginning of the year, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the details of that earlier, and then they actually turned it around, especially in defense. Their offense has gotten a little better, but the defense has gotten it's like a completely different team out there now. Well, compared to the first week of the year.
Since we're already doing it, we're already saying some nice things. Let's start with our first section, which is Hey Now, Play Nice. Let's talk about some things nice about the Bears. What they've been doing well, how they've been, being a better team recently. Dad, take it away.
So, yeah, like I said, their defense has been really good the second half of the year after a rough start. So since week 9, when they first got Montez Sweat, and as you said, you could say, well, if the first game is kind of a throwaway because he's not ready or integrated, and even better. But I decided to go there. But since he first came there, they're second in the league in defensive EPA per play per RBSDM.com, behind only the Browns, who people recognize been like a defensive monster most of the year. An enormous turnaround from the first 8 weeks of the year. They were 30th, so they went from 30th to second. In that time, they are second. So in the second half of the year, they are second in drop back EPA, 6th in drop back success rate, 7th in rush EPA, and 13th in rush success rate. It's a little bit lower there. Per PFF, if you want to look at a different way of measuring things, over the last 7 weeks, since coming to the Bears, Sweat is tied for 3rd in the league with 8 sacks. And he holds the unusual distinction of currently leading 2 different teams in sacks at the same time.
That's definitely a nice little fun stat. Like somewhere like 3 or 4 years down the line, there'll be some trivia question somewhere. It's like, who was the last play? And we'll know. Montez Sweat. Honestly, though, he has been super impactful to their team. One stat that I pulled, most of my stats are over their, quote unquote win streak of being 5-2 in their last 7. I kind of threw out that loss right before. But since they added Montez Sweat in week 9, so, every game he's played for the Bears, they've gone from 14.9 pressures per game in the 7 games without him. And then 8 games without him, and then 19.6 pressures per game in the 8 games with him. So, averaging almost 5 more pressures per game. And then they've gone from 1.5 sacks per game to about 3 sacks a game. So they're doubling the number of sacks, adding about 5 more pressures a game with him on the team. He's been a really big impact for them. And did you have anything else you wanted to talk about, about how they've ticked it up there on defense? Because I have some, just general things about how they've improved was also what I was going to talk about.
Yeah, it looks like you got a lot of detail there. You should go over.
Maybe too much. We're going to see. But here's the thing. So I was looking at it based on, they started the season 2-7, and then they're 5-2 since then. So what I was going to talk about is how much they've improved in these last 7 games where, they seem to be really playing a lot of good football. Since that win they had over the Panthers, they played the Lions very close right after that, and then they beat the Lions the next time they played them. They really should have beaten them the first time, too. They just kind of, fell into a you lose 1 out of 100 of those types of games, and they fell into that 1 out of 100. But Despite being 20th in DVOA on the year per FTN Fantasy, this is kind of, my first piece of evidence to how they've improved. They are 7th in weighted DVOA, which kind of puts a greater emphasis on more recent games than games earlier in the year. That's per FTN Fantasy. I think I probably already said that, but just
that's offense defense. That's offense defense combined.
That's offense defense combined, special teams combined as well. Just total team. They are 7th in the league in weighted DVOA. So they don't think that there are 7 teams playing better than the Bears are right now per FTN Fantasy. And then this is some interesting stats per RBSDM and Pro Football Reference, comparing how their first 9 games were when they were 2-7 to how the last 7 games are when they're 5-2. They have gone on offense. We'll start there from 23rd in EPA per play up to 18th. 12th in success rate. They've actually fallen down to 28th. That is an interesting piece that I'm going to talk about later. But 25th in EPA per dropback up to 19th. 19th in dropback success rate to 28th. So they are seeming to be in that passing game especially, maybe a little bit less successful down to down, but they are hitting on more big plays and turning the ball over less, which we'll talk about in a second. They've gone from 5th in EPA per rush to 11th and 6th in rushing success rate to 19th. From 2 turnovers per game per Fox Sports to 1 turnover per game. So the big difference is they're hitting on more explosive plays in the passing game. Running game has gone down a little bit from that earlier stretch in the season when they were unsuccessful to now when they're 5-2 in the last 7. But they're really just a slightly more balanced offense in terms of rushing game is still pretty solid, still borderline top 10, but they're able to hit some big plays in the pass game, and then they're not turning the ball over as much. But where you really see the improvement. Sorry, do you want to add something there?
Oh, I was just going to say, it's possible that for their rushing success, that may have something to do with player availability during some of that streak.
Also,
where Khalil Herbert was out for a while, and by a lot of metrics, he's actually been the best graded of the running back of the 3 running backs who've had the most work. So some of that may be circumstances to a few individual players rather than overall team performance.
It's a very good point. But the defense is really where it stands out, their improvement. Now, you talked all about, and so this will be a little bit repetitive, but for me, just, from the 2-7 streak to the 5-2 streak, they've actually gone from 30th in EPA per play all the way to 1st, 20th in success rate allowed all the way to 1st, 31st in EPA per dropback allowed all the way to 1st in the league in EPA per dropback allowed over this 5-2 stretch. 31st in dropback success rate, all the way to 2nd in dropback success rate allowed. They have, their run defense has fallen a little bit. And so, it's kind of similar to that, what's happening to them on offense, where, they're just becoming a little more even. The big improvements have been in their passing game. Their EPA per rush has gone from 3rd to 9th. It's still quite good. Rush success rate allowed has gone from 4th to 14th. Still pretty solid. The other big thing is they're forcing way more turnovers over this 7-game stretch. Gone from 1 turnover forced per game to over 2.5 forced per game. They're also getting more pressures, 18 to 20, 2.22 sacks to 3.4 sacks per game. Pretty much everything in their pass defense has really ticked up over these past 7 weeks. And that's really where you can see that growth for them. And so that's what I wanted to say nice about them. And you can say, some people might say, their defense is just very reliant on turnovers when they hear the amount that turnover amount has kicked up. And that maybe, some of those turnovers are a bit more luck based, and that turnover numbers were per Fox Sports as well. Sorry. But even if you take out all plays from all fumbles and all interceptions over weeks 10 to 17, they're still 4th in EPA per play allowed in that time per NFL FastR. So great defense any way you cut it over these last 7 weeks. And, just a very impressive turnaround that they've had with that unit. So that's my nice thing to say. Let's start crushing them. Let's start talking some mad, what. Although we do have a couple of things that we're maybe a little bit nervous about. I have some, you have some. You can go first. I've been talking for a while. But, Dad, I think there are definitely some matchups in this that don't necessarily favor the Packers. And, maybe there's some that do, but let's start with the ones that don't.
Yeah, so things that make me nervous, I start with the Packers' run defense against the Bears' run offense. As you mentioned, the Bears' run...
Who would have thought? The Packers don't match up well against a run game. Who would have thought?
Right. It's this is like a team with had a good, strong run defense and a strong run offense. We never have trouble with those, right?
No, never ever. And we have, a good traditional run game and a decent, quarterback run game where have I heard the Packers struggling with that before? I mean, not every single time we play a team with even a fractionally mobile quarterback seems to cause us troubles. And Fields is much more than that. We'll actually talk about some of those numbers later that I find interesting. But sorry, I'm stampeding,
trampeding, or stampling.
Exactly, all over your points. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, the Bears' run offense is 10th by DVOA, and the Packers' run D is 26th. So if you just look at the differential between the matchup, that 16 ranking point differential is the biggest in the game. You look at the four different kind of matchups you can have. Chicago run O versus Green Bay run D, Chicago run D versus Green Bay run O, Green Bay pass offense versus Chicago pass D, and the reverse. Well, so Chicago run offense versus the Green Bay run defense is 16, ranking points different. The Chicago's run D versus the Packers run offense is a 13 ranking point difference. The only one Green Bay actually has an advantage is in Green Bay's running offense versus the Bears run defense, which is plus 12 Green Bay. And then the Packers run D against the Bears run O is a plus 4 Chicago. So they got three of the four sort of head-to-head matchups in their favor. But the worst is their run offense against our run D. And as you talked about with their weighted DVOA, how it's looking better, and their weighted DVOA on offense has gone up, and their to defense has gone up to 5. Well, the Packers weighted defensive DVOA.
It can't be good. It's just
30th.
Can't. 30th?
It's
okay.
30th.
I'll take two teams worse than us. It's probably Denver and maybe Carolina again. I don't even know.
And so other things reasons to worry about their run offense in particular. By DVOA, they are 9th in adjusted line yards on offense, while Green Bay is 21st in adjusted line yards on defense.
It's going great over
ESPN,
here.
Chicago is 2nd on offense in run block win rate to Green Bay's run stop win rate of 16th. By PFF, Chicago is 6th in run offense, while Green Bay's run D is 20th. And so all those matchups sort of team group to team group are not, the odds are not always in our favor here.
No, not quite at all. And sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying one thing. And so then among running backs with 50 carries, Herbert has been the best graded of the three running backs, something we mentioned earlier, at 13th in the league. Compared to right next to Aaron Jones at 14th, while Rashawn Johnson and Foreman are 21st and 28th respectively. So there'll be a bit of a drop off if for whatever reason Herbert isn't able to play.
Oh yeah, and that's definitely one that I think needs to keep an eye. They have hit a bunch of we talked earlier, but the injuries where it's nothing on Wednesday, Thursday, and then limited Friday. I almost wonder if maybe they're just giving him some rest. But that's
and Herbert, there sounds like there's something else going on, and hopefully it's nothing serious, as you mentioned. That I don't think if he misses the game, I don't think it's because of injury.
Yeah, and so the thing that I'm worried about though, matchup wise, is the Fields to DJ Moore connection and how Green Bay matches up with that specifically. Mina Kimes mentioned this on her podcast, but when Justin Fields targets DJ Moore this season, he's averaging 0.7 EPA per target. And so amongst wide receivers with at least 50 targets, that's the second best connection in the league. I think only CeeDee Lamb.
Kind of crazy. Who's first? Tyreek Hill?
I think CeeDee Lamb was the only one who was higher.
Oh, CeeDee Lamb was the only one. Okay.
But either way, second in the league. And so, you look at a pass offense that, for the most part is kind of dead average by EPA per play, maybe slightly below average. Just super elite when they target DJ Moore. And the thing that makes me worried there is per FDN Fantasy, the Packers are 26th by DVOA at defending wide receiver ones. Now, Jair Alexander is going to be back in this game. They talked, he had a really nice media availability in the locker room talking about, he felt like he had a really good conversation with Matt LaFleur and, felt really good about his place on the team going forward and, just wants to go out there and play football, understands, I think maybe a bit better about why he should not have done what he did against the Panthers. But they're going to need him to have, bring his A game in this one because DJ Moore's the type of player that can just fully take over the game and has in many different instances. I mean, you just look back to that game against Atlanta last week. I mean, I know you had him on your fantasy team, so I know you were happy, but he was just running amok against that Atlanta secondary, and he's tough. And the thing is, he's tough with the ball in his hands. He's tough going downfield. And the Packers aren't exactly known as being the best tackling team in the league. So I think he could beat them a variety of different ways. I think they're going to need to, show more attention there, but they have not been good against these wide receiver ones, like we said. And that is definitely a matchup that I'm a little bit worried about.
Yeah. And, the Packers tackling has not been so good. I'm a little worried about, them paying attention to detail in terms of maintaining rush lane integrity and
because we're so good at that. We're so good at maintaining rush lane integrity. But speaking of, actually, I think that might come later when we're talking about Fields as a rusher. Is there anything else you wanted to say? But because there are some exploitable weaknesses of the Bears. They're not a perfect team for sure.
No.
So what do you have there?
There are a couple things to go with. One thing I went with here is, so a lot may depend on the availability of Jalen Johnson. And doubtful has typically not been playing this year. There's only been I tried to look at the numbers briefly, but I couldn't find it. But it's
not many doubtfuls end up playing, although you would think, last game of the season, you're not playing anymore after this, that maybe that's a little less representative of this game. Who knows? But
yeah. But anyway, Johnson has by far been their best defender in coverage per PFF grade. That's, passer rating against when targeted of only 33.3. But their other cornerbacks are not as good in coverage grade as he is. And he's another thing. Johnson has also had the second lowest yards per coverage snap at 0.4 out of 166 corners with at least 50 coverage snaps. So he's been really good.
That interests me though, because I do think it's not, the Packers are not the type of matchup where I think that matters as much, because I don't think we really have a wide receiver one.
If you only have one good corner, I think it's less of an impact on the Packers because they've been spreading the ball around so much.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like, we don't really have a true wide receiver one. Like, if this was the Packers team from 2 years ago with Devontae, although I don't think anyone could really guard Devontae 1v1 in those, like, couple of years there where he was just unstoppable.
1, 2, 3, 4 guys covering me.
Yeah. But hey, I mean, it worked. Can't knock putting 4 guys on him and maybe shut us down. But I do think, this Packers team is maybe a little less susceptible to like having their offense damaged by like a really strong corner one than maybe some previous Packers teams.
And their corner also doesn't have like a lot of blazing speed. Mm-hmm. The fastest is Terrell Smith at 4.41, and even Johnson's not that fast at 4.5.
How nice is it to finally have some freaking speed on offense?
Right. So if you believe the Packers, we have 3 receivers with 4.3 something speed. I mean, you have Watson and Melton are like 4.36 and 4.34 at the combine, and the Packers claim Reed is 4.37. But he's been playing like it.
Yeah, he
plays fast on the field.
The thing with Reed is he plays faster than he times. He plays bigger than he measures too. He's hard to tackle. Like, you watch him, like, against the Vikings, that second touchdown he had. He's just got guys draped all over him. I think back to, like, the slant that Love threw to him against the Lions, the one where Watson runs the wrong route, and it's just in the pocket. But
that one where it practically hits the defender covering Watson.
Yeah, but right after that, like, as he catches it, like, I think it's kind of lost because, like, the throw is so bonkers. But he's wearing a dude like a backpack practically, and, like, just, like, forces his way, like, an extra 3 or 4 yards into the end zone. Just, like, his core strength must be just ridiculous. For me, though, I think one exploitable weakness of the Bears is, outside of Montez Sweat, there really isn't anyone that intimidates you from a pass rushing perspective. This is per PFF over the course of their 5-2 stretch over 7 from week 10 to now. He's averaging almost 5 pressures a game. The next closest is around 3, which is DeMarcus Walker. So no one else really intimidates you on that defensive line. They got some nice young players, Javon Dexter, like, pretty good out of Florida. He's had a pretty decent year. He's also averaging, I think, close to around 3 pressures a game. But Sweat's really the main guy that you need to worry about in this matchup. And there aren't really any other, like, massive game changers, which is why, the addition of Sweat was so important, because they pretty much were lacking. They were so lacking in juice in the pass rush.
And it was really damaging their entire defense with getting no pressure before they added him.
Yeah. But Dad, let's move on to our next part, because there are some things that we certainly hope the Packers do in this game. They don't always listen to us. Sometimes honestly,
for the better.
We are we're just we're just here speculating based on, hey, this team's pretty good at this team's pretty good at that, et cetera, et cetera. But Dad, what do you hope the Packers do in this game in terms of like approach to how they would attack the Bears?
So some people might say this is a little crazy, but I'd like to see the Packers blitz Fields.
It's risky. It's risky.
It is risky, but I was looking through all the numbers. So digging through some of the PFF data, he's 25th in the league in passer rating when blitzed among 38 quarterbacks with at least 200 dropbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between how good he is without a blitz and with a blitz, so basically taking his rating when not blitzed and subtracting his rating when blitzed, he's 24th in the league in terms of maintaining his performance while blitzed. QBs so there are some QBs who are even better blitzed than not blitzed, and he's not one of those. He's only 25th in the league in avoiding turnover-worthy plays when he's blitzed per dropback. And he's only 26th in yards per attempt when blitzed. And he's also only 26th in the league in number of first downs per turnover-worthy play when blitzed. So your reward for blitzing seems to be much greater than the average risk.
And that was something that I felt like they did actually a really good job of last week against Jaron Hall and Nick Mullins, is they were sending extra guys way more than like they generally do. They're like, I think, near the lower end of the league in blitz rate. But they were sending, Keyshawn Nixon, Quay Walker, these extra rushers, Keyshawn from the slot. And I thought they did it to like very good results. So I wonder if, maybe that's a conscious change that, after several weeks of like very subpar defensive, like I wonder if like that wasn't necessarily just a matchup specific thing. I wonder if that's like a switch that they're trying to turn right now. And they're like, we just got to send some guys because we need to create a little more. Because I think the biggest thing with Joe Barry's defense to me is like, they're very static. They don't run a lot of different stuff. And there's almost no chaos from the defense. I would like to introduce maybe a little more chaos in the defense.
A little less predictability for the opposing offense.
I mean, did you
I don't expect us to I expect to see a lot of zone this week.
Oh yeah.
I expect eyes on the quarterback.
I don't mind zone.
I'd like to have a spy.
Yeah, the thing is, zone doesn't have to be. I think a lot of people hear zone and think passive. Zone does not have to be passive. You can
still be up at the line of scrimmage on zone.
Yeah, and you can be like not lined up 8 yards back. Like you could be lined up like 4 yards back. Like you could be coming downhill as a safety as opposed to backpedaling on the snap. Like there are ways to play zone aggressively. I think people like zones become like kind of like a trigger word for people.
I think people think that zone just equals prevent defense,
that's how we play zone.
That's how we played it, right?
Problem. For me though, I hope the Packers in this game, what I hope they do is I hope they're willing to run on early downs. I'm still looking at that since week 10 split for the Bears. So while they're elite against the pass on first and second down, they're actually first by success rate allowed on first and second down as a defense since week 10. They're only 16th. They're only average against the run on early downs. So in terms of success rate, that is, they're 16th. So, you can stay ahead of the sticks running on first and second down against this Bears team. They are, overall pretty good run defense, but per success rate, like you can stay ahead of the sticks, like I said. So I hope the Packers are willing to, be patient with the run game on those early downs. And I think that there's like some ability there to not get into third and longs, keep drives, sustainable, maybe even avoid getting into third downs altogether. It's definitely something I'm keeping an eye on in this one because I think there is something there. I think on like at first glance, like it's like, dang, it's really hard to run on the Bears. But, at least on first and second down, I think early when they're maybe not in as heavy fronts, I think you can maybe get some, there's some success to be had there. Sorry, I kind of long spiraling towards my point as I often do, but I did think that was something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and speaking about keeping an eye on and connected to what you said, yeah, we could move on to don't take your eye off that guy.
Yeah, which is, not necessarily who we think is necessarily going to have a huge game, but players who, like, if they play well, their team will be good. And if they don't, like, where a lot of things hinge on their performance. I think I know who you had. I think I do. Go ahead.
Yeah, so, well, you can look at it and peek ahead.
No.
But my guy is Aaron Jones, who's really been kind of it really makes a difference in the offense.
Especially with Dylan out.
Yeah. And over the last 4 weeks, he is number one in the league in PFF grade among running backs.
Let's go,
or for rushing grade. and third in overall offensive grade among running backs.
When he's healthy, he's so good. He's just so good when he's out there.
So explosive when he hits the hole and the extra yards he gets.
And he was, sorry, just to cut you off one more time, he was pretty much the reason they won the first time. Like, he was almost the entire reason they won week 1 against the Bears is that massive throwback screen and then the little kind of, Texas route out of the backfield, and where he just left is it TJ Edwards in the dust in coverage.
Yeah, that's the one where he pulled his hammy on.
Yeah. But he was the main reason they won that game, and so I think it's a really good highlight for you to pick him for this one.
Yeah, and in that time frame, he's 5th in the league in runs over 10 yards over these last 4 weeks, with 10 of them, and also 5th in first downs with 16. He is 4th in yards per carry and 9th in yards after contact per attempt over the last 4 games. And yeah, the Chicago defense has been like overall good against the run lately, but Jones had a big game last week against Minnesota's run defense, which was 9th by DVOA coming into the game.
Yeah.
So I think keep an eye on him, and if he does what he did last week, I think the Packers will win pretty handily.
Yeah, you stole mine. I was leaning towards maybe picking Jones.
That's what happens when you create the document and get your stuff in first.
Yeah, it is a race. It is a little bit of a race. But I think I feel happy with my pick. I was going to pick Zach Tom in this one. Montez Sweat, like we talked about, is really the heart and soul of their pass rush. And he 632 of his 732 snaps have been lined up against the right tackle. 86% of his snaps. So he's going to be matched up with Tom a lot in this one. Tom did quite well against Danielle Hunter last week. We're going to need a repeat performance. And, I think if Tom can win that matchup more times than he loses it, then I think the Packers, it would go a long way to helping the Packers win this game.
Yeah, I would say it seemed like last week Danielle Hunter had most of his success when he moved inside over Myers.
I wonder if the Bears see that and are like, okay, you right here, ISO, come here.
I wonder if they'll go so far off their tendencies, seeing as he's has barely gone anywhere but over the right tackle.
Yeah, I doubt they do because they just haven't done it at all. But, it could be a curveball that they're looking to pitch, especially after seeing what Danielle Hunter did last week. But, Dad, let's move on to, our last section, overtime. This is where we get to talk about some things that maybe we hadn't got to touch on yet that we found interesting. I've got something that I think might be a little spicy, a little hot take, and I'm sure is 100% going to come back to burn me. But, Dad, what did you have first?
So I have basically that Love is on a heater.
Oh, yeah. He's on a heater.
After week 11, Love is 2nd in the league in EPA plus completion percentage over expected, including being 2nd in EPA per play, 5th in success rate, and 2nd in completion percentage over expected. And remember, in the first half of the year, his combined number was okay, but it was dragged down by a bad completion percentage over expected. And now he's over the second half of the year, he's 2nd in the league in that. He's also 1st in PFF offensive grade among all QBs and 2nd in PFF passing grade over these last 6 weeks. And he's 2nd in the league in touchdown passes with 14 over that span, and has fewer interceptions than any QB in the top 14 in TDs during that time. He's with 14 touchdowns and 1 interception.
He is playing
the last 6 weeks
out of his mind. The last 7 weeks. The last 7 weeks is 1,800 yards, 16 touchdowns, 1 pick. I mean, he's playing out of his mind right now.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is it doesn't really seem to matter too much who he's throwing to. That's when you tell a quarterback is really on a hot streak. Like last week, if you look at PFF grade amongst all receivers last week, Reed was 2nd in the league and Melton was 6th in receiving grade amongst all wide receivers in week 17.
Yeah, no, he's playing really freaking well. Just keep moving. Just keep carrying that forward, For me, though, the thing that I wanted to touch on is Justin Fields running. We haven't talked about it yet. Obviously, super dynamic rusher and athlete. And the Packers are pretty poor against running quarterbacks, as we've detailed. Fields has the most rushing yards per game this season, per StatMuse at 52.5 yards per game. And the Packers are allowing the 3rd most rushing yards to quarterbacks per football DB. So, that's good against bad, as we would say. Although I did find that, per some more advanced numbers, he's not as efficient as a running back amongst quarterbacks as I would have expected. So on designed runs, this is per NFL Fast R. His .022 EPA per play ranks just 13th amongst quarterbacks with at least 10 carries. So that was a bit surprising that he was, kind of more middle of the pack amongst quarterbacks on design runs. Still a very, efficient play. Like if you looked at it in terms of like running games in general, it would be, it would be the equivalent of the second best running game in the league. But, just like quarterback design runs are just generally more efficient as is, especially when you're good at them because you're not running them as much and they're a little more, the element of surprise, as they would say. But yeah, so just 13th amongst quarterbacks with at least 10 carries in EPA per play on design runs. And then as a scrambler, his .65 EPA per play also ranks 13th amongst quarterbacks with at least 10 scrambles. Still a very efficient play, but, just look at, scrambles in general are super undervalued, actually. They are like crazy efficient. I think last year Ben Solak wrote a piece about how like the average scramble is as valuable as a Mahomes pass, which is just insane to think about. A lot of that is, a bit just like a lot of scrambles are happening near the goal line. A lot of scrambles are happening on third down. So, more high leverage plays in general. But I did still think it was interesting, just 13th amongst quarterbacks with at least 10 carries. Obviously, we know that he's super dynamic with his legs, and this is obviously going to come back to bite me. But I did just find it interesting that, despite, leading the league in yards per game, his EPA per play on both design runs and scrambles is, still just like not quite even top 10 amongst other quarterbacks. Some of that's, some of the fumbling, but I think even if you took that out, he was just 9th, if I remember correctly, in EPA per play on scrambles. I don't remember the one on design runs off the top of my head. But yeah, so I just found that interesting. Obviously, I'm super jinxing it, and it's going to suck when he runs like 2 different 70-yard touchdowns like Kaepernick. But yeah, it is what it is.
Kaepernick, a 70-yard scramble up the A gap,
or Fields again. He's done it before, or Daniel Jones, or Tommy DeVito. I mean, we have seen just like a billion different quarterbacks run for just a ton on us. So I shouldn't even be saying anything, but I just was in my research, found those stats, and I thought they were vaguely interesting, so I figured I'd throw them in here. But Dad, let's start wrapping things up. Bottom line, the Bears win if blank.
What I have is if they can force multiple Green Bay turnovers without turning it over themselves. That's kind of been what they've been doing. One of the things they've been doing well lately is forcing more turnovers. But I don't think it'll be enough if they just get one turnover, unless it is coupled with, God forbid, some kind of special teams touchdown.
Oh, man, just don't even put that out there in the ether, Dad. That it would happen too. It would, and because the thing is, we have not yet had our monstrous special teams mistake of the year yet. We've had some bad ones. We had the Rashid Shaheed punt return touchdown. We've had the muff punt against Minnesota. We've had some other muff punts. We had the Keyshawn double fumble. We've had some bad ones, but we have not yet had
that was a bad one. Fumble, get up, and fumble again.
We have not yet had the fully backbreaking fumble yet, and I just feel it. Or backbreaking, block punt or block kick or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's definitely needling at the back of my head that we're maybe due for that. For me, though, I was actually also going to say if Green Bay doesn't take care of the football, but my secondary one is the Bears win if the secondary of Green Bay can't contain DJ Moore. If he's just, taking screens 20 yards down the field, 30 yards down the field, if he is, catching him down the sideline like he was against Atlanta, I think that's going to be a tough one for the Packers to handle. Other side of the coin, though, Dad, Packers win if blank.
Basically, if they don't get gashed from the Bears' run game and can actually force the Bears into enough passing situations by not letting them just run ahead of the sticks over and over again and have 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, or convert first down with 2 run plays. Because I just don't think the Bears are going to be able to do enough for the passing game if they have to throw the ball.
Don't hold your breath on stopping the run game. I'm just going to say that. For me, though, I had the Packers win.
Well, that's just kind of, I guess you could say it's kind of like saying if the hand of God comes down and stops the Bears offense, is that the same as asking that the Bears aren't going to run the ball all over the Packers?
If they take the mask off of Joe Barry, after the game, Scooby-Doo style, it's like Wade Phillips or something like that. I don't even know. But I have Packers win if they stay patient on offense. I think as long as they don't have to be, they're not trying to force anything I think that they should be able to, move the ball well enough. However, let's get down to score prediction, Dad. Wrapping things up here. Last game, potentially last game of the season, might be our last preview pod. You never know. But don't worry, folks.
But as we said earlier, I'm hoping there's still 4 more to go after this one.
Yes, hopefully. But if and one successful post-game pod. But if it is our last one, don't worry. We will be doing 1 episode a week during the off season anyways. We'll be talking about free agency, coach and staff moves, the draft. We love the draft over here at Father Son Packer. We will be getting deep into the weeds on prospects, mock drafts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So don't turn that dial, as they would say. But Dad, score prediction for this game. What do you got?
I'm feeling good. And I'm going, and I like the way the Packers offense have been playing. I'm going Green Bay 31, Chicago 17.
Nice. I'm going Green Bay 24, Chicago 14. That's what I got for this one. Hoping for the best, knock on wood for both of those. But yeah, let's go take care of business. Let's go make some noise. Who knows? Who knows what would happen? But anyway, this has been the Father Son Packers podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard here today, come give us a follow on Twitter at Father Son Packer. We tweet out when we have new episodes out, stats we find interesting when we're doing research for these pods, articles we find interesting, videos we find interesting from other Packers content creators, pieces of Packers news, including injury reports, roster moves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, come give us a follow. Once again, that's at Father Son Packer, and then subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We even put all our episodes out on YouTube as well. If you want to subscribe to us there, it would really help our numbers. Once again, we are doing an episode a week in the off season, so don't turn that dial. And yeah, come hang out with us. Come keep listening. We appreciate it. Give us feedback, comment, subscribe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.